Okay, welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to look at a particular sketch from the Claude Lorrain album, and I think I'm going to superimpose that image over the screen, and I'm going to read the description from the Claude Lorrain album, written by Marcel Rothenlisberger. Hopefully that's correct pronunciation, but we're going to jump to it. So, number 6, landscape composition, 204 by 268 millimeter, so about 20 centimeters by 27 centimeters. Black chalk, pen, deep brown wash, date between 1635 and 1640. The basic layout and motifs of this drawing compare with the preceding sheet, but the more finished execution conveys the effect of an independent image. Firmer than the average nature drawing, it is on the other hand less complex than a painting. There are no figures, no details in the foreground, and the spatial expanse is limited. One may assume that the drawing was done in the studio. The composition is governed by the regular succession of planes from the dark foreground triangle on the left to the brightly illuminated middle zone on the right and to the distant hills. The left and the right halves are contrasting, horizontal and open, vertical and closed, yet the entire image is also tightly framed by the dark foreground and the house on one hand, and by the cluster of trees on the other hand. Part of the secret of Claude's art is that his strong compositional patterns never become rigid. The execution is enlivened by the basic contrast between the plain areas of the deep wash, the altogether empty, illuminated portions, and the two grades of the dense penwork in the foliage. While there are many related compositions in the year around 1640, none is directly linked with this. So that being said, I am now going to work on a sketch from this. I'm going to use some brown ink, and we'll see from there. All right, so I did the pen sketching portion. I used some of the Daler Rowney acrylic ink, the sepia. I did use a little bit of the black Conte to kind of mark some locations at first. Now, a few things before I then do the time lapse for the ink wash. It said that he had used brown ink, but it doesn't specify what brown ink is. And whenever I've looked in the past into just historical inks, I'll see things about iron gall. I'll see stuff about, I think it's a bistre, which was taking the wood ash and mixing it with water. I've also seen that they would take pre-existing ink and mix brown into it to get the brown that they wanted. There's also websites that talk about walnut ink, and then others that say that walnut ink wasn't probably as common. So that was one thing I was thinking about when doing this sketch. I was also thinking, would a quill have been used? Would a reed have been used? And would just a sharpened stick have been used? we see people today in 2023 that apply ink drawings with sticks. So I'm curious what he had used as the implementation device. I was also curious if he was left-handed or right-handed. I feel like I recall somewhere in one of the descriptions for another drawing, it had said perhaps he was practicing with his other hand in that one. Okay, and then to the actual mark making itself, I was using the glass dip nib at first. Usually they go for a long time and hold quite a bit of ink. This time, not so much. So it may just be the acrylic ink. Maybe this doesn't flow as well. Maybe I need to water it down or something. But I switched over to the Kakamori brass nib. And you'll see areas where it laid down thick marks and areas where it laid down thinner marks, kind of more expressive, kind of played around a bit with that. We can see some areas that blobbed, dried darker, areas that went lighter. In regards to the actual sketch making, there was two things that popped out. This kind of edge of the river, edge of the water growth, boom, 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 hooking up, occurs 1, 2, 3, 4, if we can count that. And then almost back here it occurs as well. So it occurs a few different times, that symbolic marking. And in other regards, there was horizontal hatching. There was really no cross hatching taking place. We did have the curved lines to give us the form here. And I did notice that the two branches coming off here, it doesn't look as though he drew the branches. It looks as though they were created by the variation and washes themselves, or maybe using these lined marks, so these little da-da-da marks, da-da-da, to build up on either side, and then once it would be washed in, it would create the illusion of the branches. I drew mine in, but I don't know, I would have to sit down and look closer at it. It's just some ideas, and that's the point of doing these studies, is to get compositional elements to add and think of different ideas for this. So I'm going to put some of this ink out in this kind of I forget the name of these type of pans, like a petal type pan, flower wells, and I'll water it down, and I'll do a time lapse of the washes over this. I'm most likely going to use the squirrel mop, and we'll see if we need to do anything further than that. There are some light ink lines back here that I didn't put in, mainly since I wasn't thinning down the ink as I went. Though you can see that we did get the lighter marks naturally through that nib. I think if I had just waited till I had a little bit last bit of ink left and made those marks back there, that would have been helpful. Or maybe they're chalk lines. Maybe they're that black chalk that I talked about using in the beginning. That being said, I'm going to move on to a time lapse of the ink wash. Okay, so after the time lapse of the ink wash, a few things I want to talk about. With this, before doing the time lapse of the ink wash, I speculated, just talk about the different types of ink that I guess could have been used. And I went with the acrylic ink in this case. Obviously, back then they did not have acrylic ink. I could have went with this. I could have went with the Dr. P.H. Martin's, either the Indie Ink Brown or the sepia. There is fountain pen inks that I could have used. I could have watered down some watercolor and applied that. Could have played with gouache. So a whole lot of options there. I felt like that stage for me was the learning and exploring wash stage, where I was looking at his work, but I was also trying to learn the medium because I really haven't played too much with ink washes. I've done it in the past. I did it once or twice in college. It's a very beautiful process, but it's something that I don't pursue as much as I should, and I think it's a great way to do studies. That being said, the first thing that I kind of went for was the dark wash. Then I immediately thought to myself, you know what, let me thin it, let me put the mid-tone in, and I'll cover areas that will be darker regardless, then go back in with a more watered down brush for these marks and higher intensity applications of ink over the mid-tone washes. There were some that had me a little worried with how dark they went down, especially at some point in this corner. You'll see that I actually wound up dabbing it up. But it does dry and you can see the marks underneath it. So it creates a very beautiful effect. The other thing is that with, I think, the carryover from watercolor and using the brush, in the beginning I was doing that side swipe here and I wanted to create dry brush effects, and I really don't see much of that. Maybe a little bit in here in the original. I have it set up behind the tripod, so I'm looking at it from a distance, but the dry brush effect didn't really seem to get utilized, so that's something I'm going to have to look for. I did play around with the darkening of the foliage around the branches themselves, but I did wind up having the same tone. So it might be just a practice of the application there to get those variations and to create those different forms, or to spend more time in the sketching phase to develop the darks here. As you can see, the dark marks from the drawing showing through. We could probably go back in and do some more marks on top if we wanted to, and kind of push back and forth, almost set the stage with the marks, dry off, do the wash, and then mark after it. I'm curious what process and what technique there is for that. On a side note, I believe Mark K on YouTube has a demonstration where he does a pen with watercolor wash on top of it, and then watercolor wash with then fountain pen on top of that, and shows the two approaches from different angles. So that's what this one has me thinking. There's obviously parts that I'm not happy with, and there's parts that I am happy with. The extreme contrast between the light and the darks here, I'm very happy with it, and I think Mr. Claude Lorrain was an absolute master of that, and I plan on looking for that more in this future sketches and practices. It was also, for me, reminiscent of some of the Goya etchings, which we'll have to look at that book one day, especially in the first series in that book. I have the complete etchings of Goya, and in the first series there's very stark bright light and dark areas of tone, so that's something to look for as well. I wonder who he was looking at, but that's for another day. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I plan on doing more of these. When I did pull the ink directly from this bottle, I used this just to pull the dip pen. I used the quill pen to pull it out. I did get this super dark, as opposed to I guess just having a wet brush and then pulling some up. So there's more to be learned with the inks itself, and to figure out what type of ink I want to wind up using. But then again, that's just more practice. Also, let me change this light so you can see, because I had the light shining on the book. That might get a better view of it. Yeah, you can get a better view. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed, and let me know what you think down below. Please like, subscribe, follow, and those of you that support on the Patreon, thank you so much for your help. It helps these explorations, getting these books, playing with the different material, etc. So thank you, and have a great day.